Howdy folks, it's Aries and welcome back to Mindfork. I did debate on doing a spooky themed episode for Halloween, and I still might, but if I do get around to it, it'll probably be after the spooktacular season has run its course. What I really want to talk about is the new Dispatch game by AdHoc, brought to you by the same developers of The Wolf Among Us, but we already knew that. Episode 1 and 2 came out not too long ago, and it looks like for the next month or so, 2 episodes will be released on a weekly basis. Kinda means I have to get this video out faster. So where should we start? Well, I think we should quickly go over what we know for certain about the game first, and then we can get into the speculation when everyone's up to speed. Sound good? Perfect. Bear in mind that since episode 1 and 2 have already been released already, I'll be talking about its content, so spoiler warning for that, and I'm also going to piece in some details about the trailers I saw prior to the release, some of which I thought were interesting, but of course there's some auxiliary information I need to address as we get there, but we'll tackle all that as we get to it. The game gives us the role of Mechaman, otherwise known as Robert Robertson. Yep, that's his real name. Even worse, he's Robert Robertson III. Before him was his father, Robbie, who we'll call Astral, and before him was his grandfather, Bobby, who we'll call Prime. 3 generations of Mechaman who all used the suit to do hero work because they themselves did not have any superpowers. Prime made the suit, died, then passed it on to Astral, who joined a superhero team called the Brave Brigade. Sometime later, another member of the same team, Shroud, kills Astral and is sent to prison shortly after. The mugshot he got at that time tells us that Shroud's real name is Elliot Connors. Although Robert's age is unconfirmed, I'd say he's probably around 15-ish when his dad dies, and so he likely didn't start using the suit until he was a lot older, and therefore has likely only been Mechaman for less than a decade at least. Then, as we all know, after 15 years in prison, Shroud breaks out and gets involved with a group called Red Ring, which seems to be a group of cybernetically enhanced criminals. I'm not sure if he made this group or if it existed before him, but either way they all follow Shroud by the time we meet them in-game. Robert eventually tracks down Shroud to a steel mill, gets ambushed, blown up, and then while he's in a coma, his suit's power source, the Astral Pulse, is stolen, and with nothing to power Mechaman anymore, his days as a hero end for the time being. And then we start the game in Dispatch as a I forgot the acronym. SDN, it's SDN. Now, there's a lot of missing information and a metric shit ton of questions to boot, so we're going to have to tread carefully with this one since we don't want to accidentally fall into a rabbit hole of infinitely layered assumptions. Before we get into my theory though, I wanted to quickly address the most prevalent one I saw while doing research for this video. So, the main theory here is that back when Shroud/Elliot supposedly killed Astral, that the real Elliot was actually the one to die and Astral faked his own death to take Elliot's identity. I shouldn't need to tell you that this clearly doesn't work for quite a few reasons. The first is the mugshot. Although they share the same mustache, it shows 2 different people. I've seen some discussion that this mugshot is of the actual Elliot and was taken before Astral took his identity, but that's so needlessly complicated for no reason, since what purpose would that serve? Why would Astral take a murderer's identity and rot in prison for 15 years? Not to mention that Robert, Chase, and literally anyone else in the Brave Brigade would have noticed too. He's got no mask in prison, so you're telling me nobody from the old team saw his face after he got arrested and made the connection? Doesn't make a lot of sense either way. Another reason this doesn't really work is that, although this is speculation, I'm fairly certain that Robert's father was the one that made the Astral Pulse since he was referred to as Astral Mechaman. I don't see why else he would be called that if he and the Astral Pulse weren't directly related in some way. I also noticed that the Prime Mechaman suit has an array of large canisters on the back, whereas later versions don't. My guess is that these are the original power supply, and Astral was the first to make a smaller energy source to pilot the Mechaman suit. Regardless, there are just far too many holes in this theory, so it's back to the drawing board for that one. But even aside from that, there's one main reason why I don't think Shroud's identity is in question. In the interview, after the suit is busted, we're told by a reporter the timeline of events for Shroud are as we detailed them. He kills Robert's father, goes to jail for 15 years, then breaks out and immediately baits Robert into a trap to disable Mechaman and get the astral pulse, which he now has, by the way. Robert says as much during the same interview.
Shroud wanted the astral pulse and Mechaman gone. He got both.
If Shroud were anyone else other than Elliot, it would eventually have to be explained why someone would choose to spend 15 years in prison without saying anything, and why nobody, including the other members of the Brave Brigade, suspected anything in that 15-year period. But honestly, something that interests me way more than his identity is what the actual fuck could have possibly happened to turn Shroud, a once well-known and well-intentioned superhero, into a literal supervillain that kills his own teammate seemingly overnight. Well, to answer that, first we have to go through some observations. By the end of the fight between Robert and Shroud in the first episode, it becomes quite clear that Shroud does not want Robert dead. In the middle of the attack, Shroud admits he only wants the pulse and offers Robert a way out of the situation alive.
Good news, buddy. Shroud says he just wants the astral pulse, which we all know isn't really yours anyway.
Then, when he plants that bomb on Robert's back, he knows exactly what it'll do. It doesn't kill him, it just disables the suit. And lastly is when Robert was in a coma. Like the reporter mentions, Shroud left him alone entirely. And so, after all that, if Shroud really wanted Robert dead, he would be dead. So then that begs the question, if Shroud isn't willing to kill Robert, then why was he willing to kill Astral? It makes me think that although Shroud may want the pulse now, that's not the reason he killed Astral 15 years ago. So then, what was the reason? Something that's bugged me about how Astral died is the method. The way Toxic talks about how Shroud killed Astral sounds so angry.
Oh hey, after our conversation, I asked him about your dad. Turns out right after Shroud shot him in the chest. So after that bullet tore through his insides.
Of course that could just be Toxic being a dick, maybe Shroud didn't even say that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he did say that verbatim, but the fact remains that Shroud did kill Astral by shooting him in the chest, and so the implications of that detail alone suggest that Shroud attacked Astral outside of his Mechaman suit, and if he was outside of his Mechaman suit, then Shroud's attack probably came out of nowhere, right? But again, why? Well, what if I told you that Shroud killing Astral was an accident? As I mentioned earlier, I suspect Astral created the astral pulse himself, and that it was not a technology inherited from Prime. However, I left out a detail. I don't think he made the astral pulse alone. Shroud is quite obviously a talented and brilliant engineer. We see his cybernetic enhancements and also a little bit of robotics work his goons are messing around with. He and Astral, working on the Mechaman suit together, would also explain why he knows it so intimately that he can guess its power level without even looking at any of the numerical data inside.
So, what do you got left on them shields? I said 40%, but Boss Man says you're down to 28. And he is not wrong about this thing.
So it's possible that while in the Brave Brigade, Astral and Shroud worked together to create the astral pulse for the Mechaman suit, but after it was created, perhaps Shroud got a little more ambitious, maybe wanting to use it for his own cybernetic enhancements, and eventually leading to a fight between the two where things escalated and Astral got shot. I mentioned it earlier, but the fact that Astral died from a single shot to the chest, not from something more Mechaman related, suggests to me that Astral wasn't in his suit when he died, and was caught off guard when this happened. The only reason I can think of them fighting without being in superhero mode was if the fight wasn't a physical one, if it was a disagreement of some kind that very quickly escalated. So Shroud accidentally shoots Astral and doesn't know what to do. He didn't mean to kill him, they were all part of the same team, they were like family. Astral himself even felt close enough bringing his own son to meet and bond with all the brigade members. They got to know Kid Robert well enough to even designate one of the other members, Chase, as the at-home babysitter. So when Astral died, he didn't just lose a teammate, he lost someone he genuinely cared about. Because let's be real, if he truly hated Astral or wanted him dead for power or greed, he wouldn't have sat in prison for 15 years afterward doing nothing. He'd have left, built something, made an army, whatever, but instead he vanished into a cell and stayed quiet. That's guilt, plain and simple. But then Robert grew up. and he becomes the all-new, bright and bushy-eyed Mechaman. Same name, same symbol, powered by the exact same astral pulse that caused everything to fall apart in the first place. And that's when Shroud finally starts to move. He breaks out, baits Robert into a trap, and steals the pulse. Not to kill him, but to stop him. Shroud's goal in the modern day is the Astral Pulse, that much is clear, but the fact he killed Astral and yet hopes to spare Robert suggests to me that getting his hands on the Pulse isn't where this ends. Think about it, Shroud is sitting in prison, wants the Pulse, and is one jailbreak away from getting it for 15 years. Robert at this point is in no position to stop Shroud from taking it, but then years after Robert takes up the mantle and gets experience in defeating numerous supervillains, Shroud suddenly cares enough about the Astral Pulse to not only break out of prison, but to immediately beeline it for Robert and disable his suit? Tell me that's not the most suspicious thing you've ever heard. When Robert says,
Shroud wanted the Astral Pulse and Mechaman gone. He got both.
I think that line tells us that Shroud wasn't trying to end Robert. He was trying to end Mechaman. Not for any altruistic reasons or for any reason that impacts society or the world as a whole, but simply because Shroud does not want to lose any more people to heroism, to Mechaman. This broken thing that chews up good people and spits them out. Prime and Astral died for it, Shroud lost everything because of it, and now 15 years later he's watching Astral's kid, Robert, walk into the exact same trap as both of them. So yeah, he's the villain now, but in his head, he's saving Robert from something far worse. And if all of this is true, then that adds a completely different layer to Shroud's character. He's not building machines and cybernetic soldiers because he's lost his mind. He's doing it to try and control the chaos that the heroes can't. He doesn't see himself as destroying Mechaman. He sees himself as saving what's left of Robert before that suit kills him like it killed his dad. Robert says it best himself, after all.
The family tradition, if there is one, is dying in that suit.
And being what caused it in Astral, he hopes to stop it before it gets to Robert. And that's all, folks. Now, before I end off this video, I wanted to make some smaller predictions. These are based mostly on the trailers, but given shape by what we see in episodes 1 and 2, so bear in mind that these won't be dependent on my bigger Shroud theory. The first one is that Phenomaman and Blazer break up. At one point, we see Phenomaman in pretty poor condition, not having shaved his beard and looking pretty sullen. And then again, when he's passed out on top of somebody's car. He comes to Robert for advice, presumably, and seeing how gaudy he was in episode 2, I can only imagine it's about Blazer, since I can't see him going to Robert about anything else when he already sees himself as better in most other ways. Because of that too, I don't think the breakup would be about Robert, since Phenomaman doesn't seem to hold a grudge against him, so it's probably going to be about something super normal for relationships. Although, even if the breakup was about Robert, I don't imagine she'd say that to Phenomaman, considering that he could kill Robert with, like, his pinky finger or something. The second prediction is that somewhere near the end, probably episode 6, 7 or 8, when the Mechaman suit is functional again, Robert pilots it out of SDN headquarters against their advice or permission. There's a moment when Royd breaks through into the room, presumably to stop Robert from using it. I can't say for what reason he would risk it, but either way it's going to be for his team, or it's going to be about Shroud. And finally, we're really getting to the bottom of the barrel with this one. Flambe is going to become a big problem later, at some point. In the trailers, we see someone burning down a mall or something, which, come on, has to be Flambe, and Mechaman going and busting shit up. Although in the actual trailer, it was framed as being the incident that broke his suit, so it's possible that this whole thing was cut and replaced with the Shroud fight we got instead. Going through frame by frame, I did notice a bunch of trickery to make scenes feel like they were connected though, so it could be a double whammy, but I'm not confident about it, which is why I called it a bottom of the barrel prediction. Also just want to mention that halfway through the episode 2 main gameplay where you actually dispatch heroes, Flambe just sort of goes off and burns down a fucking normal ass mall for some reason. Now whether that's a allusion to what we saw in the trailers or whether that's a indication that he's going to do something a lot bigger later, who can say. But either way, it remains a prediction. I'm not holding out much hope for it. Anyway, that's all for now. Actually, this time. Join me for the ride if you fancy, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.